Tonight, the national spotlight remains fixed on a desert landscape where a family's desperation meets the cold machinery of a massive federal and local manhunt. 2 weeks have passed since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home in the quiet outskirts of Tucson. And this evening, the investigation has taken a sudden, aggressive turn. Tactical units and forensic specialists have descended upon an affluent subdivision just miles from where Guthrie was last seen, signaling a significant escalation in a case that has gripped the public consciousness. In a series of coordinated maneuvers, law enforcement executed high-stakes search warrants, swarming a private residence with a level of force rarely seen in missing persons cases. The arrival of a SWAT team in the pre-dawn hours suggests that authorities are no longer merely looking for a missing woman in frail health, but are perhaps bracing for a confrontation with whoever or whatever led to her disappearance. The neighborhood, typically a bastion of suburban tranquility, was transformed into a staging ground for a grim forensic extraction, as investigators in white coveralls were seen moving in and out of the property throughout the day, carrying out evidence bags that may hold the key to a mystery that has only deepened with every passing hour. While the primary search focused on the residence, a secondary, equally intense operation was unfolding in a nearby parking lot. Federal agents and local officers converged on a gray Range Rover, a vehicle that has become a central piece of the investigative puzzle. The scene was clinical and exhaustive. Every inch of the SUV was photographed and cataloged before it was hoisted onto a flatbed tow truck and removed for high-level forensic processing. Eyewitnesses at the scene reported seeing an individual being detained by agents during the sweep, marking the second time in 48 hours that someone has been brought in for questioning. However, despite the visible intensity of these maneuvers, the official word from the Sheriff's Department remains frustratingly opaque. They have confirmed that they are aggressively tracking leads and that the recent warrants were the result of specific actionable intelligence, yet no formal arrests have been made. The person detained at the scene of the vehicle search was eventually released, echoing the pattern of a previous person of interest who was questioned and then let go. For the Guthrie family, this cycle of hope and disappointment is becoming unbearable as the physical evidence begins to mount, even while the trail for Nancy herself remains cold. The investigation is currently leaning heavily on the digital footprint left behind in the moments before Nancy disappeared. Detectives are meticulously reviewing a sea of surveillance data ranging from sophisticated home security systems to the grainy images of doorbell cameras. One particular piece of footage has become the focal point of the search: the image of a man, his face obscured by a dark ski mask and his hands covered in gloves, lurking on the doorstep of the Guthrie home. He is described as being of average build, standing roughly 5 feet 10 inches tall, but it is his gear that has caught the attention of investigators. He was seen carrying a specific brand of backpack, a low-cost item sold primarily at a national retail giant for approximately $11. This detail has launched a massive retail tracking operation as teams of investigators attempt to trace the sale of that specific item through regional transaction logs. It is a needle in a haystack endeavor, but in a case where the suspect was careful enough to hide his face and hands, this common consumer item may be the one oversight that allows the police to put a name to the shadow on the porch. Beyond the visual evidence, the forensic battle is being fought in the laboratory. DNA analysis has yielded a breakthrough of sorts, though it has yet to lead to a suspect. Technicians have successfully isolated genetic markers from the property that do not match Nancy Guthrie or anyone who had legitimate access to her home, such as family members, landscapers, or maintenance workers. This unidentified DNA profile is now the primary target of a genetic manhunt. Furthermore, the discovery of discarded items, including a single glove found during a roadside sweep, has provided additional material for testing. The sheriff has been vocal about the importance of these findings, suggesting that while they are currently in the process of elimination, the net is beginning to tighten. The public has been urged to remain vigilant, with authorities asking residents within a 2-mile radius to re-examine their own security footage from the 1st and 2nd of the month, looking for any vehicle or individual that seems out of place in their quiet, high-end communities. The emotional weight of the disappearance is felt throughout the Tucson community and beyond. Nancy Guthrie is not just a missing person. She is a mother and a grandmother whose sudden absence has shattered the sense of security in a region where such violent mysteries are supposed to be rare. Her daughter, a high-profile figure in her own right, has taken to social media to vow that the family will never stop searching, a sentiment that has galvanized thousands of supporters. Yet the reality on the ground is stark. As the desert sun sets on another day of searching, the lack of a suspect in custody and the absence of Nancy herself cast a long shadow. The sheriff's department has made it clear that until a definitive break occurs, no one associated with the case is fully cleared. The tension in the air is palpable, a mix of community-wide anxiety and the cold, calculated precision of an investigation that is slowly but surely unearthing the dark secrets hidden behind the manicured lawns of the Arizona suburbs. Meanwhile, the geopolitical landscape is being rocked by a revelation that reads more like a Cold War thriller than a modern diplomatic report. International eyes have turned toward Moscow following a stunning allegation regarding the death of a prominent Russian opposition figure. While the official narrative from the Kremlin has long maintained that the leader succumbed to natural causes while serving a lengthy sentence in a remote Arctic penal colony, a coalition of European allies is now presenting a far more sinister explanation. According to these reports, high-level forensic testing conducted by laboratories in Britain, France, and the Netherlands has identified traces of a rare and lethal toxin known as epibadidine in the leader's system. This substance is not a product of a standard chemical lab. It is a potent alkaloid derived from the skin of certain tree frogs native to the rainforests of South America. The choice of such an exotic poison suggests a level of premeditated cruelty and a desire to send a message to any who would challenge the state's authority. The symptoms of epibadidine poisoning are horrific, involving a rapid decline into convulsions, respiratory failure, and cardiac arrest. For those who watched the opposition leader's health decline during his imprisonment, these findings provide a scientific basis for what many have suspected all along, that his death was an execution carried out by the state. His widow, speaking from a position of both grief and defiance at a major security conference, has seized upon this report as definitive proof of a government-sanctioned assassination. The timing of this revelation is critical, as it coincides with a period of renewed aggression on the part of the Russian military, which has intensified its strikes on major urban centers in Ukraine. The report has created a firestorm of condemnation among Western leaders, who see the use of such a rare toxin as a blatant violation of international norms and a chilling reminder of the lengths to which the Kremlin will go to silence dissent. This international tension serves as a backdrop to a growing domestic scandal that has reached the highest echelons of the entertainment industry. The fallout from the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files continues to claim powerful victims, with the most recent casualty being a titan of Hollywood talent management. Casey Wasserman, a man whose name was once synonymous with sports marketing and celebrity representation, has announced the sale of his namesake firm. This move comes in the wake of the publication of deeply suggestive emails exchanged between Wasserman and Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted associate of the late Jeffrey Epstein. The correspondence, which dates back more than 2 decades, portrays a level of familiarity and inappropriate conduct that has made Wasserman's position at the head of his agency untenable. Despite his public apologies and his insistence that he had no knowledge of the criminal activities taking place within Epstein's circle, the damage to his brand has been swift and severe. The exodus of high-profile clients was the final blow. Major stars, including Grammy-winning musical artists and legendary sports figures, have moved to distance themselves from the agency, citing the toxic nature of the revelations. In a somber note to his employees, Wasserman acknowledged that he had become a distraction to the mission of the company he built. While he intends to remain as the chairman of the upcoming Olympic Games in Los Angeles, a position that has survived a formal review by the organizing committee, his status as a power broker in the private sector has been effectively erased. The scandal also continues to ripple across the Atlantic, where British authorities are currently assessing whether to launch a full investigation into allegations of misconduct in public office by a former member of the royal family. The Epstein files, once thought to be a closed chapter, are instead proving to be a catalyst for a global reckoning that shows no signs of slowing down. As these stories of crime and scandal dominate the headlines, the natural world is offering its own set of challenges. A massive weather system is currently sweeping across the United States, bringing a dangerous combination of severe storms to the south and heavy snowfall to the northeast. From the Gulf Coast of Texas to the Florida Panhandle, the threat of tornadoes and damaging winds has put millions on high alert. Simultaneously, a cold front is pushing through the I-95 corridor, threatening to disrupt the Monday morning commute with a fresh layer of snow in cities like New York and Philadelphia. This dual threat storm is a reminder of the volatility of the season, and emergency management agencies are working overtime to prepare for the potential impact on travel and public safety. In the midst of these sweeping global and domestic events, a story of individual heroism has emerged from the icy waters of a New York pond. A 14-year-old boy, acting with a level of courage that far exceeds his years, jumped into action when he saw a younger child fall through the thin ice of a local park. Without waiting for professional rescuers to arrive, the teenager utilized a nearby safety ladder to reach the struggling child, pulling him from the freezing water just as firefighters reached the scene. The image of the young rescuer, shivering but determined, has become a rare bright spot in a news cycle otherwise filled with conflict and tragedy. It is a testament to the fact that even in a world of high-level geopolitical maneuvering and complex criminal investigations, the simple, brave actions of a single individual can still make a profound difference. The search for Nancy Guthrie, the scientific proof of an international assassination, the collapse of a Hollywood empire, and the heroic rescue of a child. These are the threads that make up the tapestry of tonight's report. Each story, though seemingly disconnected, speaks to a common theme of accountability and the search for truth in an increasingly complicated world. Whether it is a sheriff in Arizona hunting for a masked intruder or a group of European scientists analyzing a rare frog toxin, the goal remains the same: to bring light to the dark corners of the human experience and to provide answers to those who are waiting in the shadows. As we continue to follow these developing stories, the focus remains on the pursuit of justice, the protection of the innocent, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. The forensic theater in Tucson continues to expand as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long skeletal shadows across the Sonoran landscape. The focus of the investigation has now shifted from the initial shock of the Suati intervention to the agonizingly slow process of digital reconstruction. Federal technical specialists have begun the monumental task of geofencing the entire neighborhood, a process that involves scrubbing every cellular ping and Wi-Fi handshake that occurred within a 1-mile radius of the Guthrie residence during the critical 48-hour window of her disappearance. This is a silent, invisible hunt, conducted not with battering rams, but with algorithms. Every device that moved through the area is being scrutinized, every signal cross-referenced against the unidentified DNA profile recovered from the property. There is a growing sense among the investigative team that the masked man captured on video was not a random predator, but someone who had been observing the home for a significant period. The precision of the entry, avoiding the primary alarms while being caught only by a secondary peripheral camera, suggests a level of premeditation that has elevated the case from a local missing person search to a federal priority. The gray Range Rover, now secured in a high-security impound lot, has become a silent witness. Technicians are using high-intensity ultraviolet lights and chemical sprays to look for trace evidence that the naked eye would miss. A single strand of hair, a microscopic drop of blood, or even the unique dust of the Arizona desert that might place the vehicle at a specific secondary location. The individual detained and subsequently released remains under constant surveillance, a tactic designed to see if they will lead the authorities to a hidden site or attempt to dispose of further evidence. The community is on a razor's edge, with neighbors who once left their doors unlocked now installing additional security measures and viewing every unfamiliar car with suspicion. The sheriff has been forced to address the growing public anxiety, promising that the resources of the state will not be diverted until Nancy is found, but the lack of a body or a ransom demand has left a void that is being filled by increasingly dark theories. The discovery of the Walmart backpack remains the most tangible lead, and detectives have fanned out to every retail location in a 3-state area, reviewing thousands of hours of transaction footage to find the person who purchased that specific $11 bag. While the domestic search for Nancy Guthrie continues to dominate the American psyche, the international community is reeling from the technical specifics of the Navalny forensic report. The identification of epibetadine has sent shockwaves through the diplomatic world, not only because of its lethality, but because of the specialized knowledge required to refine and administer it. This is a toxin that requires a sophisticated laboratory to stabilize. In its raw form, it is too volatile to be used as a reliable weapon. The implication is clear. The substance was manufactured in a state-run facility. European intelligence agencies are now looking back at other unexplained deaths of dissidents across the globe, wondering if the South American frog toxin has been a signature of the Kremlin's clandestine operations for years, hidden in plain sight because standard toxicology panels do not look for rare Amazonian alkaloids. The widow's testimony in Munich has become a rallying cry for increased sanctions, but the reality on the ground in Eastern Europe remains grim. As the debate over the poison intensifies, the front line in Ukraine continues to burn, with reports of heavy artillery strikes hitting civilian infrastructure in Kiev, a brutal reminder that the conflict is being fought with both invisible poisons and high explosive munitions. The fallout from the Epstein files has moved beyond the initial shock of the names involved and into a phase of corporate and personal destruction. The sale of Casey Wasserman's agency is not just a business transaction. It is a symbolic decapitation of a Hollywood dynasty. For decades, the Wasserman name was the gold standard in representation, a gateway to the inner circles of fame and power. Now that name is being scrubbed from building facades and email signatures. The internal climate at the firm is reportedly one of chaos and betrayal, as agents who have spent years building their portfolios now find themselves associated with a brand that has become radioactive. The suggestive emails with Ghislaine Maxwell, which featured graphic and predatory language, have served as a catalyst for a broader clean house movement within the industry. High-profile artists are no longer content with simple apologies. They are demanding a complete overhaul of the leadership structures that allowed such associations to persist. This corporate collapse is a stark illustration of how the ghosts of Jeffrey Epstein's network continue to haunt the present long after his death in a Manhattan jail cell. The political ripples of these scandals are being felt in the halls of Congress, where a standoff over Department of Homeland Security funding has pushed the agency toward a partial shutdown. The debate has become a proxy war over immigration enforcement and the conduct of federal agents. Democrats, emboldened by public outcry over recent high-profile killings by federal officers in Minneapolis, are refusing to sign off on a new funding bill unless it includes mandatory body camera requirements and a ban on the use of tactical masks during arrests. The image of the faceless agent has become a powerful political weapon, one that Republicans argue is a necessary component of officer safety, but critics claim leads to a lack of accountability. As the deadline passes, the real-world consequences are beginning to materialize. Thousands of federal workers, including TSA agents and members of the Coast Guard, are now facing the prospect of working without pay. The timing could not be worse, as a severe winter storm system threatens to paralyze the nation's transportation hubs. If the shutdown persists, the combination of understaffed security checkpoints and heavy snowfall could result in a total collapse of the regional air travel network. In the midst of this bureaucratic and geopolitical turmoil, the human element continues to assert itself in unexpected ways. At the Winter Games, the pursuit of athletic perfection is being tempered by the very real and very public displays of human emotion. The story of the speed skater winning his second gold medal is being overshadowed by the romantic dramas unfolding in the Olympic Village. From viral social media posts about searching for love to high-profile marriage proposals on the snow-covered slopes, the Games have become a stage for something more than just sport. It is a fascinating juxtaposition. While world leaders argue over poisons and funding, and while detectives in Arizona sift through desert sand for a missing woman, a group of young athletes is focused on the fleeting, intense beauty of a Valentine's Day at the peak of their careers. The ice dancing pair who skated together for 14 years before marrying in 2024 has become a symbol of endurance. Their performance a literal representation of a partnership that has survived the grueling pressure of international competition. But even within the sanctuary of the Olympics, the world's conflicts cannot be entirely ignored. The controversy in the curling arena, a sport usually defined by its quiet precision and rigid etiquette, has erupted into accusations of cheating and verbal altercations. The double tapping of the stone, a minor technical violation, led to an explosion of temper that required the intervention of the Olympic Committee. It is a reminder that even in the most controlled environments, the pressure of the moment can shatter the veneer of sportsmanship. The committee's decision to increase umpire observation is a small-scale version of the broader call for transparency that is echoing across the globe, from the streets of Minneapolis to the Arctic circles of Russia. Back in the United States, the weather remains the most immediate threat to the average citizen. The meteorologists are tracking a line of storms that is currently tearing through eastern Texas and northern Louisiana. A tornado watch has been issued for a massive swath of territory, and the imagery coming out of the region shows a sky turned a bruised, ominous purple. This is the same system that is expected to dump inches of snow on the Northeast, creating a logistical nightmare for emergency responders. In Santa Rosa, California, the unpredictability of daily life was underscored by a freak accident where an SUV plowed into a crowded grocery store. The sound, described by witnesses as an explosion, left 7 people injured and a community in shock. That the driver was wearing a medical boot on her leg at the time suggests a tragic lapse in judgment rather than malice, but it serves as another example of how quickly a normal afternoon can turn into a scene of carnage. The narrative of the day is one of fragmentation and collision. The rescue of the child in Queens, pulled from the ice by a 14-year-old with a safety ladder, stands as a solitary act of pure, uncomplicated goodness. It is the one story that requires no investigation, no forensic analysis, and no political debate. As the child was rushed to the hospital, bundled in blankets provided by local firefighters, The image of his young rescuer became a brief viral sensation, a moment of collective relief for a public that is currently being bombarded with news of poison, disappearance, and corporate greed. The contrast between the boy's instinctive bravery and the calculated cruelty of a state-sponsored poisoning is stark. One represents the best of the human impulse to protect, while the other represents the darkest application of human ingenuity. As we move deeper into the night, the threads of these stories are beginning to weave together into a complex picture of a world in transition. The space station is now fully staffed, a reminder that human curiosity and cooperation continue, even as the planet below is divided by borders and ideologies. The SpaceX delivery of a multinational crew, American, French, and Russian, offers a glimpse of a future where the conflicts of the present are left behind in the atmosphere. But for those on the ground, the reality remains grounded in the search for answers. Whether it is the mystery of Nancy Guthrie's location or the truth behind the toxin that killed an opposition leader, the demand for accountability has never been higher. The next few hours will be critical for investigators in Tucson as they process the evidence from today's raids, and for diplomats in Europe as they decide how to respond to the scientific proof of a murder. The storm is coming, both literally and figuratively, and the resilience of the systems we have built to maintain order and find justice is about to be tested. The forensic perimeter in Tucson has expanded into the digital architecture of the entire Southwest as federal analysts begin the painstaking process of time sliding through regional commerce data. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has reached a critical bottleneck, where the physical evidence of the $11 Walmart backpack and the unidentified DNA must intersect with the movements of the masked figure captured on the porch. Specialized units have begun a massive audit of secondary market sales and digital transactions, looking for a match to the specific gear worn by the intruder. This is the unglamorous heavy lifting of modern detective work, an exhaustive search through millions of data points to find the one person who purchased a ski mask, gloves, and a budget backpack in a single transaction. Simultaneously, the search of the Range Rover has yielded a new chilling detail. Forensic technicians have discovered traces of a professional-grade cleaning agent in the vehicle's trunk, suggesting a deliberate attempt to sanitize the car before it was seized. This discovery has shifted the tone of the investigation from a search for a missing person to a pursuit of a sophisticated adversary who understands the mechanics of a criminal investigation. As the physical hunt for Guthrie intensifies, the international community is grappling with the profound implications of the South American frog toxin used against the Russian opposition leader. The forensic confirmation of epibetadine is more than just a medical diagnosis. It is a geopolitical indictment. Intelligence analysts suggest that the choice of this specific alkaloid was a deliberate signature intended to be discovered, a silent warning to dissidents everywhere that no prison is too remote and no border too secure to provide protection from the reach of the state. In Munich, the rhetoric has shifted from condemnation to a formal call for a global ban on the synthesis of such rare toxins for military or intelligence purposes. The widow of the fallen leader has become a central figure in this movement, using her platform to demand that the world treat this not as a domestic Russian affair, but as a violation of the chemical weapons conventions. The tension is palpable as Western nations weigh the risk of further escalation against the necessity of holding a nuclear power accountable for a scientific assassination that looks more like a ritual execution than a standard political murder. Back in the United States, the collapse of the Wasserman Agency has sent a shockwave through the financial markets, as investors begin to fear that the Epstein files may contain similar liabilities for other major talent and marketing firms. The rapid dissolution of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise over a series of decade-old emails has rewritten the rules of corporate survival in the modern era. Boards of directors across Hollywood and Wall Street are reportedly commissioning private audits of their executive leadership's past communications, desperate to identify any potential associations with the Epstein-Maxwell circle before they are exposed by further document leaks. The case of the top agent selling his firm is now being used as a cautionary tale in business schools, a demonstration of how reputational contagion can destroy decades of brand equity in a matter of days. As the agency's top-tier athletes and artists flee to rival firms, the legal battle over non-compete clauses and contract breaches is just beginning, promising years of litigation that will keep the sordid details of the case in the public eye. The partial government shutdown is now entering a dangerous new phase as the lack of funding for the Department of Homeland Security begins to impact the front lines of national security and public safety. At major airports, the strain on TSA employees, working without the guarantee of a paycheck, is starting to show. Long lines and frayed tempers are becoming the norm, a situation exacerbated by the massive winter storm system currently bearing down on the East Coast. The political standoff in Washington remains frozen, with both sides refusing to blink. Democrats have made it clear that the recent killings in Minneapolis by federal agents have created a mandate for reform that cannot be ignored, while Republicans maintain that stripping agents of their anonymity and adding layers of judicial oversight will leave law enforcement vulnerable to retaliation. In the middle of this ideological war are the federal workers who must decide whether to continue reporting for duty or to seek temporary employment in the private sector to cover their mortgages. The ripple effect is already being felt in the Coast Guard and FEMA, where emergency response readiness is being quietly downgraded just as the hurricane and severe weather seasons loom on the horizon. In the sports world, the Winter Games continue to provide a surreal counterpoint to these heavy global narratives. The story of the speed skater winning gold, while his viral search for love plays out in the background, has captured the imagination of a younger, digitally native audience. It is a reminder that even under the most extreme pressure, the human desire for connection remains a primary motivator. Yet, the games are not entirely insulated from the darker trends of the world. The curling controversy, involving accusations of double tapping and unsportsmanlike conduct, has led to an unprecedented move by the Olympic Committee to install high-speed 4K cameras at ice level to monitor every movement of the stones. This forensic sports approach mirrors the broader societal trend toward total surveillance as a substitute for trust. Even in a game defined by the spirit of curling, the honor system has been replaced by the objective, unblinking eye of the camera. The athletes themselves seem divided on the change, with some welcoming the clarity and others mourning the loss of the sport's traditional integrity. As the severe weather system moves across the South, the destruction left in its wake is becoming clear. In the suburbs of Houston and through the rural corridors of Louisiana, the bruised sky of the afternoon has given way to the reality of splintered homes and downed power lines. Search and rescue teams are moving through the debris of several small towns hit by confirmed tornadoes, working against the clock as temperatures drop behind the cold front. This is the same system that is expected to transform into a major blizzard as it hits the moisture of the Atlantic, putting New York and Boston in the crosshairs of a significant snow event. The intersection of this weather emergency with the government shutdown represents a perfect storm of logistical challenges. If FEMA's coordination capabilities are hampered by staffing shortages, the recovery efforts in the South could be stalled for weeks, leaving thousands without power or shelter in the dead of winter. The narrative of the young hero in Queens continues to resonate, providing a much-needed emotional anchor for a public overwhelmed by the scale of the world's problems. The 14-year-old's decision to act, fueled by a simple realization that I need to help him, stands in stark contrast to the calculated inaction of the political leaders in Washington or the hidden motives behind the Arizona disappearance. The child he rescued remains in the hospital, and while his condition is stable, the psychological impact of the event is being felt by the entire community. It has sparked a conversation about the safety of urban parks and the lack of visible rescue equipment in public spaces, turning a moment of individual bravery into a catalyst for local policy change. It is a reminder that while the big stories are written in the halls of power or on the world stage, the most meaningful stories are often written in the quiet moments of a Friday afternoon in a city park. As we look toward the final phase of tonight's reporting, the focus returns to the primary question: where is Nancy Guthrie? The forensic activity in Tucson has entered a new, more intensive stage as investigators begin to analyze the soil and vegetation samples recovered from the Range Rover. They are looking for a match to a specific remote location in the vast Arizona desert, a place where a vehicle could be hidden or where a person in frail health could be kept away from the prying eyes of the public. The clock is the enemy now. Every hour that passes reduces the likelihood of a safe return. The Sheriff's Department has hinted that they are preparing to release a more detailed description of the masked man's movements, hoping that a fresh wave of public tips will provide the final piece of the puzzle. The tension between the need for secrecy in an active investigation and the public's demand for answers has reached a breaking point, and the coming hours may determine whether this story ends in a rescue or a recovery. The global and the local are now inextricably linked. The frog toxin in Russia, the Epstein emails in Hollywood, the funding battle in D.C., and the search for a grandmother in Tucson are all part of a larger struggle for clarity in an era of shadows. We are seeing a world where the traditional boundaries between news categories, crime, politics, weather, and sports are breaking down, replaced by a single continuous narrative of risk and resilience. The space station, orbiting high above these conflicts, remains a symbol of what is possible when the focus shifts from the divisions of the Earth to the possibilities of the stars. But for the millions of people currently bracing for a storm or waiting for news of a loved one, the reality is much closer to home. The night is far from over, and as the various investigations and weather systems move toward their respective conclusions, the search for truth remains the only constant. The investigation in the Arizona desert has reached a final feverish pitch as the forensic window begins to close. Tonight, the Sheriff's Department, bolstered by federal behavioral analysts, has released a startling new profile of the primary suspect. They are no longer looking for a common thief, but a high-functioning individual who may have a professional background in logistics or surveillance. This pivot comes after the discovery of a sophisticated signal jamming device found discarded in a drainage culvert less than half a mile from the Guthrie property. The device, which is capable of neutralizing standard wireless security frequencies, explains why the majority of the home's high-tech defenses failed to trigger during the abduction. This revelation has sent a tremor through the affluent communities of the Southwest as the realization sets in that even the most expensive security systems can be bypassed by a motivated and equipped predator. The search for Nancy Guthrie has evolved into a masterclass in modern criminal pursuit, with investigators now tracing the origin of the jamming components through international supply chains, hoping to find a buyer whose profile matches the elusive figure in the ski mask. As the physical evidence in Tucson points toward a sophisticated kidnapping, the geopolitical fallout from the Epstein report has reached a diplomatic crescendo. At the United Nations, a coalition of nations has formally introduced a resolution to classify the South American frog toxin as a controlled chemical weapon, a move that would trigger automatic sanctions against any state found to be stockpiling it. The forensic data provided by the European labs has been vetted by independent scientists, and the consensus is undeniable. The toxin was stabilized using a proprietary process that is a known specialty of certain Eastern European research institutes. The widow of the opposition leader has become the face of this global movement, her presence at international summits serving as a constant, haunting reminder of the human cost of state-sponsored chemical warfare. The Kremlin's continued denials have become increasingly hollow in the face of such specific scientific evidence, and the world is now watching to see if this frog poison diplomacy will lead to a new era of international accountability or a further hardening of the lines between East and West. In Hollywood, the dismantling of the Wasserman Empire is nearly complete, serving as a grim blueprint for the future of corporate accountability. The sale of the firm was finalized in the late hours of the weekend, with the assets being absorbed by a conglomerate that has already announced a total rebranding and a zero-tolerance ethics policy. The former agent at the center of the scandal has retreated from public life, but the legal vultures are just beginning to circle. A class action lawsuit is being prepared on behalf of former employees and clients who claim that the culture of the agency was one of systemic complicity and that the Epstein-Maxwell emails were merely the tip of a much larger iceberg of misconduct. This case has become a lightning rod for the broader movement to purge the entertainment industry of the remnants of the Epstein era, and the discovery process in the upcoming trials is expected to unearth even more uncomfortable truths about the intersection of wealth, fame, and exploitation. The domestic crisis in Washington remains at a deadlock, with the partial government shutdown beginning to paralyze the very systems meant to protect the American public. The Department of Homeland Security has warned that without an immediate infusion of funds, the integrity of the nation's borders and the safety of its airways will be compromised. The images of TSA workers standing at their posts without pay have become a powerful symbol of the human cost of political brinkmanship. Meanwhile, the severe weather system that tore through the South has merged with a northern cold front, creating a massive multi-state emergency. In the aftermath of the tornadoes in Texas and Louisiana, the lack of federal disaster coordination is being felt acutely. Local authorities are struggling to manage the recovery efforts with limited resources, and the looming blizzard in the Northeast threatens to cut off the supply lines that are desperately needed in the storm-ravaged South. It is a moment of unprecedented national strain where the failure of governance is meeting the fury of nature in a direct and devastating collision. Against this backdrop of global and national turmoil, the human stories of the Winter Games provide a final bittersweet reflection on the themes of the week. The American speed skater, having secured his legacy with a second gold medal, was seen celebrating not with a publicist, but with the fellow athlete who responded to his viral quest for love. In an era of manufactured celebrity and digital personas, the simplicity of their connection has resonated with millions. Similarly, the alpine skier who accepted a proposal on the slopes has become a symbol of joy in a news cycle that has been otherwise devoid of it. These moments of personal triumph and romantic connection serve as a necessary counterweight to the stories of poison and betrayal. They remind us that even as we build massive systems to monitor, govern, and sometimes destroy one another, the fundamental human impulses to love, to compete, and to persevere remain unchanged. The curling controversy has also reached its conclusion, with the Olympic Committee issuing a formal clarification of the double-tapping rule. While the Canadian team was eventually cleared of intentional cheating, the incident has left a lasting mark on the sport. The introduction of high-speed cameras and increased umpire oversight has changed the quiet world of curling forever, mirroring the way the Epstein files and the Navalny report have changed the world of business and diplomacy. Transparency is the new global currency, but as the athletes and officials have discovered, it comes at the cost of the traditional trust that once underpinned these institutions. The spirit of the game is being replaced by the certainty of the data, a shift that is as inevitable as it is melancholy. As the night draws to a close, the focus returns to the quietest and most urgent story of them all, the child in Queens and the teenager who saved him. The boy has been released from the hospital, and his family has issued a statement of profound gratitude to the 14-year-old whose quick thinking prevented a tragedy. In a world of complex forensic searches and high-level geopolitical maneuvering, this story remains the most powerful testament to the impact of a single individual. It is a reminder that while we may be living through a time of great uncertainty and systemic failure, the capacity for bravery and compassion is still very much alive in the next generation. The teenager who has shunned the hero label has become a reluctant icon of a different kind of power, the power of being present and being willing to act when others are paralyzed by fear or indifference. The search for Nancy Guthrie continues into its 15th day, but the tone of the investigation has shifted. There is a renewed sense of urgency as the forensic teams begin to triangulate the data from the jammer, the backpack, and the DNA. The sheriff has announced a final press briefing for the morning, leading many to believe that a major breakthrough is imminent. The desert is a place of secrets, but it is also a place where the truth eventually comes to the surface, bleached by the sun and stripped of its disguises. Whether Nancy is found in a remote cabin or a suburban basement, the resolution of her disappearance will provide the final chapter in a week that has seen the world grapple with the darkest and brightest aspects of the human condition. We are a society caught between the shadow of the masked intruder and the light of the young rescuer. And as we look toward the dawn, we are reminded that the pursuit of justice is a marathon, not a sprint. The SpaceX mission to the International Space Station, now successfully docked, offers the final image of the night. From 250 miles above the Earth, the storms in the south and the blizzards in the north are merely patterns of white against a blue marble. The political boundaries that cause shutdowns and the diplomatic rifts that lead to poisonings are invisible from that height. The crew, American, French, and Russian, are working together in a fragile environment where cooperation is the only path to survival. It is a stark contrast to the world below, but perhaps it is also a roadmap for the future. As we sign off tonight, the image of the station passing over the dark side of the Earth serves as a reminder that even in the deepest night, there are those who are looking toward the light, working to find answers and waiting for the sun to rise on a new day of truth.